Okay. Ooh, smells done. Okay, should we get started? Bismillah. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we're going to move into the next verse, verse number 8 of Surah Al-Mu'minoon. We wrapped up on the previous verse and the characteristic that was being discussed, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ, until the end of that section. So verse number 8, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ is getting us now closer to kind of the end of this kind of mini course that went a lot longer than we had thought it was going to go for. But in this verse, there's going to be the next two characteristics. Some of the Mufassirin would say that this qualifies as one additional trait. Some would break it down into two. Essentially, those who are watchful over their trusts and their covenants. And we'll kind of break down the verse in detail. Look at what the language of it is. So I shared in the WhatsApp group a couple of documents. And in terms of a characteristic, like this is a really important one when we talk about the concept of what an amana is, as well as what the concept of an ahad is. But so much of our religion is rooted in this idea of integrity. Right? There's very explicit hadith where the Prophet ﷺ indicates that somebody who lacks trustworthiness is not a trustworthy person. Like they just don't have iman. May Allah protect us from this, right? And what constitutes being trustworthy and truthful, a person of integrity and good character, someone who is trusted and upholds trust. We're going to talk about a lot of that today, but we'll get through the entirety of this verse likely today. And then we will do the next verse. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَوَاتِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ, probably next Monday. And then the last two verses that talk about the people who have these characteristics, may Allah make us from amongst them, become the inheritors of Jannat al-Firdaus. May Allah grant us entrance into his Jannah without any judgment. We'll probably fold that conversation into the end of next week's class, depending on how long these next two sessions take. So if we look at some of the breakdown of the language here, the wow in the beginning of this verse that initiates it, similar to what we've seen in the previous verses, is just a conjunction that is going to give continuity to the previous verses that came forth, and is going to introduce now also a distinct characteristic. So when we looked at وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ, and then the verse after إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ غَيْرُ مَلُومِينَ فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. The subsequent verse describing وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ is started with إِلَّا, and then verse number 7 started with a fa. So the wow here goes back to that same kind of structure that we saw in the previous verses, right? وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. So that wow is going back now to this list of characteristics, showing continuity. It's not making a list of items that are kind of separated from one another, right? The way if you go to a grocery store or even on this table, there is a mic and mail and a laptop and a bag and a bottle of water. All of these things like are separate and not necessarily have overlap. Like these characteristics are also seen as having a thread of continuity and connection to each other. But the wow is just kind of giving it connection to the previous verse. Alladina, we said, means those who, and it's giving us like another idea of like, who is this successful believer? Qad aflaha al-mu'minoon. Who is the believer that has succeeded? Well, it's the one that does this thing. They uphold trusts and covenants. They watch over, they nurture the trusts and covenants. Hum is not a necessity in this sentence, similar to the previous verses, but is giving more emphasis again that these are truly the ones who do this thing, and giving it this specificity is also creating a sense of ownership, right? الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ, those who have khushu in their prayer, meaning that someone can't have your khushu for you, you have to have it, right? Someone can't avoid distractions. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ, you have to avoid it, right? Nobody can uphold your trusts and covenants. You have to uphold the trusts and covenants. It's not something that's done by somebody else. Like you have to be responsible for those things. So the home is giving us an indication of particularity also that shows a subjective relationship to the characteristic that's being defined here. No one can fulfill your trust on your behalves. Li amanatihim, the li here is giving a sense of commitment to the amana, that you have not just a responsibility, but a responsibility that's embedded in a sense of concern and care for what it is that you've taken on as a trust. And if you have an amana, the li is giving an indication. Qad aflaha al-mu'minoon, everything goes back to a characteristic trait of the believer, that believer, the person of Iman, is giving full responsibility to every single trust, right? Li amanatihim, that it's not that there is kind of a negligence in one regard because of something else. There might not be like the same allocation of time. Do you know? I don't give the same amount of time to my son, my daughter, my community, my health, my well-being, my emotional state, my parents, right? You can't measure it, but there's still a sense of full commitment and attentiveness to each responsibility. Does that make sense? The li here is evoking this. Amana is the singular of amanat. And so here now is like one of the first keywords that you want to really think about deeply. The amana here, meaning like a trust, and it has, if we look at a breakdown of its etymology, alif, mim, noon, it denotes like a sense of safety, security, a sense of sanctity. And the word amana has like two definitions to it. The act of giving the possession itself, right? If I took this bottle of water and I said, Yasin, watch over my water, it denotes that he will hold onto it and eventually give it back to me. Does that make sense? I'm not saying here's a gift for you. I'm not saying drink my water. Do you know? I'm saying you keep an eye on my water. Does that make sense? The act of me giving him the water is called an amana. And the thing that I'm giving him to look after is also called an amana. Does that make sense? So me giving the water, that actual act of giving the water is an amana. It's a trust. And the object of the trust, of the act, is also a trust. Yeah? Sure? So two things, not hard to understand. You're like, yeah, Khalid, we're not dumb. It makes a lot of sense. So the action is the amana and the object is the amana. There's a trust. And the trust is rooted in these words that you can see have a similar meaning to them. Aman means security. Iman means faith, right? Because your faith is what makes you secure as a believer. May Allah make us the strongest of believers. My iman in Allah, my iman in the last day is what enables me to have safety when I walk around in the world. It's not a protective shield that if the rain falls, the rain won't strike me. But my iman is going to enable me to have a sense of self that doesn't become compartmentalized when I walk into certain rooms or certain places. You can't mute belief if you really have a belief in something. Does that make sense? A mu'min is a believer, and a believer is not somebody just who believes in a virtue or a theological doctrine. It's also somebody you feel safe around, right? If someone is truly a person of iman, right, may Allah make us from amongst them, you don't feel insecure around them. Like you feel a sense of security in a place that's supposed to be secure, or a person that is supposed to claim like having that sense. And Amin is trustworthy, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he was known as As-Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful one, the trustworthy one, before he was even known as a prophet. So amana has all of these elements to it: a sense of security, a sense of safety, a sense of trust, reliability, a sense of peace, a sense of protection. If I give him the trust, I'm trusting that he's going to look after it, that he's going to watch over it, and that eventually it's going to come back to me. That's the part of the trust. Does that make sense? And we'll delve into it a little bit more. Amanat is in the plural purposefully, denoting a lot of different things that we can have as trusts that are given to us in the most tangible sense, in a theological sense. Like there's things that we inherit as Muslims as a trust. And we'll look at some of the verses relevant to it. And a key part to this also is that it's a one-way transaction, an amana. Does that make sense? Like if I give Yasin the water, it's not because he gave me $1 for the water. That's not an amana. I'm just giving it to him. And then it's not because he gave me something back. There's no exchange or reciprocity, you know? It's just, hey, I'm going, my wife and my kids went to Egypt yesterday, right? Make dua for me. I don't know when I'm going to Egypt, but there's a good chance for the next 2 months I am going to be on my own. I don't really know how to do a lot of things by myself. So we'll see how this goes. But one of the things, amongst the many things my wife told me to do while she was gone, she spent like hours in the last couple of weeks of heat, like planting all kinds of flowers and things in our front yard and in our backyard, because now we have a yard because we live in the suburbs. And she said, you have to water the plants. And I said, all kinds of questions, but she has entrusted me to do that. Does that make sense? So if I wake up tomorrow and I'm feeling lazy and I don't water the plants, I'm not watering the plants because she gave me $5 to water each plant every day for the days she's gone. That's not an amana in the same way, right? There's a transaction there. That's a contract. It's a contractually like rooted obligation of some kind. Do you know? If I don't water the plants, which is the core of the responsibility, right? Or if I, step on the plants, right? If I pull out the flowers and I give them to my mother, which is a nice thing, but it's still not what the responsibility was about. Do you know? How do I fulfill the trust? I just got to water the plants and try my best. My watering of the plants is in a place where her giving me direction still is an element to it. If it's ambiguous, so I was on FaceTime with her today, and I was like, hey man, how much water am I supposed to put on these things? And she was like, well, just stick your fingers in the dirt and see how dry the dirt is. And I was like, do you know who you married? Like, what are you even saying to me? Stick my fingers in the dirt and see how dry it is? What am I supposed to do then? If it's like, how do I know what the qualities of dryness are of the various layers of soil? And my wife is a tough lady, so she just was like, just water the plants. So I'm going to water these plants. If I don't know how to water the plants and she entrusted me with it, there's two folds to this. If I claim I know how to do something, it's different than if you trust me to do something that I'm telling you I don't know how to do. Do you know? And we'll delve into it a little bit more deeply, right? But the overarching trust is not in me watering the plants. There's a trust that's honored because I willfully chose to marry this woman. And these are kind of residual trusts that come from that. Does that make sense? And she didn't marry me because when she's countries away, that I would just sleep in and then pretend an animal came and ate the flowers. Do you get what I mean? Right? The responsibility, characteristics, and criteria, we'll discuss a bit. The amana goes in one way, and eventually she's going to come back and take care of her plants on her own. Right? I'm just doing it in a temporary setting. Does it make sense? Yeah. Okay. Amana to him, the him as a suffix pronoun is giving an individual understanding again, but it's also giving an understanding that trusts have diversity to them, meaning everyone doesn't have the same responsibilities. If we walked around in this room and said, what is each person responsible for? You don't want to think about it in a reductive way. A definition that we'll revisit in a bit is rooted in an attachment to the previous verse. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. We talk about zina and responsibility, and zina of the eyes and the ears and whatever else. Amana, if we gave a baseline definition to it, every single thing that you have control over or some element of control over becomes an amana. Does that make sense? You get to decide what you put into your body when you're eating. You get to decide how many hours you sleep. You get to decide whether you greet people or don't greet people. You get to decide whether you pray at work or you don't pray at work. You get to decide who you give charity to and who you don't. And what does someone have to look like for you not to be there for them? You get to decide whose secrets you honor and whose secrets you don't honor. You get to decide in relation to your particular trusts, and these are things that you have control over. The expansiveness of it is that this idea of trust plays a role in pretty much every single thing. Do you know? And you don't want to break the trusts, right? With yourself, with people, with Allah. Amana, in and of itself, is responsibility. I've been given it. Sometimes I don't want to have it, but it doesn't mean that I get to turn my back on it. And I uphold it, and I don't betray it, even if it was betrayed towards me. And we'll talk about that in a little while also. And the hymn here, Amana to him, is saying that it's not the same for every single person. It's going to be different. And so you can look and see where there's shared responsibility, but you might have responsibility that the person next to you does not, and vice versa. Do you know what I mean? I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. All of you don't have 13-year-old and 10-year-olds, right? You're not responsible for my 13-year-old and 10-year-old. I'm responsible for my 13-year-old and 10-year-old. Even when my 13-year-old and 10-year-old are sitting in a different country, it doesn't mean that I have a vacation now from being a father or being a husband. If more so, I have to learn how responsibility adapts to a different situation. Does that make sense? Right? The him is denoting that it's yours, but being yours also that it might not be the same as somebody else's. The wow that comes after is an and that is going to now join these two concepts, amanatihim wa ahad. That these are trusts and covenants. There's a nuanced difference, but they have like a connected relationship to them, and they're connected closely in the prism of responsibility that is entrusted to us, and the ahad is a kind of uh, uh, an agreement or covenant that you're willfully entering into in a different way that now might have two parties privy to it. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Ahdihim is the next word. It has the root of ain ha dal, and the meanings that are coming from this similarly have responsibility, covenant, a pledge, a promise, and it's a commitment that you'd want to think about at the level of like two people or more being kind of committed at that contractual level. Does that make sense? The amana is one way. I gave water to Yasin and there's no transaction. Do you know? A marriage contract you can think about in relation to the verses before, right? There's two parties, there's agreements, there's things that are meant to be upheld. Is there trust within that? Yeah. But it also has like a promise that's being made that is very much like important, different from the word wa'ad, right? So if you speak Hindi or Urdu, maybe Bangla, I don't know Bangla, but maybe there's a cognate, right, where you have the word like wada, vada in Urdu, right, is a promise. Do you know? That like wa'ad is different from ahad, because when Allah talks about covenants that He takes with us as humanity, He uses this word ahad. Like it's got a really important element to it that understands that you now have some distinction between an amana and an ahad. The ahad is something that has an element of willful entrance into it, but the responsibility now also has some elements that are transactional. And we'll talk about the distinctions a little bit more, but it's a covenant, you know? Like you're taking an oath, a promise. You don't want to break that. Do you get what I mean? Contractually, you don't get hired to like play games at work, right? When Abu Bakr radiallahu an like closes the flame on the state-sponsored candle when he's Khalifa and puts his own personal candle when he's doing personal work, and vice versa, there's a responsibility that's there. But as the Khalifa, he's also salaried when it's found that he's still going to the marketplace to sell goods, because the Prophet didn't have a salary. Do you know what I mean? So they're honoring kind of responsibility in that way that says, here is something that has like a deeper level of responsibility outlined in this way. And so you could think about this in terms of friendships, familial ties, professional commitments, promises you make to the divine, right? Because you're not going to say like you've given Allah an amana. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? And then the last word, ra'un, comes from ra'ain ya. The word shepherd is derived from this root, ra'i. There's the hadith we'll look at in a little bit. Kullukum ra'in. The Prophet ﷺ says, all of you are shepherds. And that sense of responsibility that's rooted in shepherding, like you're caring for pastoral nature, there's a sense of protection and nurturing that comes, like you're looking after your trusts and your commitments, your responsibilities, your oaths in a way where a shepherd would look over their flock. If I have 20, 30 sheep that I leave, someone has entrusted me with as a client, I got to come back home with 30 sheep. I can't say to them, well, one of the sheep didn't listen to me, or one of the sheep, the color of their wool was different from the other ones. It didn't look the same way, or one of it was just really dumb and wandered off. And even when I told it, don't wander off, right? The sheep gets 30, the shepherd gets 30 sheep, they come back with 30 sheep. There's no like way to look at it differently. And it has to have this sense of care. Every single prophet we're taught had some socialization around shepherding. The prophet, peace be upon him, was a shepherd, to understand it with this like nurturing, watching over, identifying uh, this in this way, because you're not then just simply getting it done, but you're engaging trusts and commitments in these levels beyond fulfillment and more so through the frame of like shepherding them. Like, what does it mean to shepherd a trust? The shepherd is attentive, protective, consistent, patient, and the trust requires continual care. It's not something that's just occasional attention. Do you know? Does that make sense? Right? Understanding it at that level where language becomes important. So, what I'd like for us to do, just because more people have trickled in, let's turn to the persons next to us. What do you think this means? The idea of shepherding our trusts and our promises, our commitments. Like, if we were to take that from a language standpoint and to illustrate it for us in relation to the mere fulfillment of something, do you know? I can go home and bring food in my house and tell my kids food's on the table and I fulfilled a responsibility, right? It's not nice. You know what I mean? Like, where is the element of love in this? Where is the care? What would it look like? Do you know? Where does the shepherding come in responsibility? If I wake up at Fajr time today and I don't get home till 11 o'clock, and my son is sitting on the couch, which he's not because he's in Egypt, and he wants to watch like some World Cup game that started on the other coast that's still playing, and he's all happy and laughing, and I'm sitting there, how do I shepherd that trust? Do you get what I mean? How are you shepherding like trust when it comes to secrets, like your kind of attentive care of your physical body, your emotional wellness, your fajr, your dhuhr, thinking about it through that element of what an attentive nature is rooted in. So let's talk about this for a bit, just to kind of get people going. If you're not sitting next to someone, maybe kind of move and sit with someone. Pairs minimally, but try it no more than three so everyone gets to talk. What does this mean? Like, what does it evoke for you, this idea of shepherding trust? Let's talk about it a bit, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, what are we talking about? What does it mean, like this idea of shepherding trusts? Allah could have used any words, but he used this very particularly, ra'un. Like, what does that kind of evoke with you or illustrate to you? Yeah. What do you guys pass this by?
Assalamu alaikum.
So,
So all that I was thinking about while you were speaking was children are nirvana. And in this era of motherhood with me, I just, refer everything back to my job as a mama. So I was just thinking, like the example that you used of bringing food home, the portion of where the amana would come in is not just like, yeah, no, I didn't just buy them the food, but I bought them the food. I also put it on the table. And then I also sat them in their chair and pushed them up to the table so that they can eat comfortably. And, so that's just what I was thinking, referring it back to my life as a mom and the things that, I'm doing to help uh, raise her to be a human that can go off into the world by herself. And that's my trust. Like, Allah trusted me with this little human to do my part.
yeah. Anybody else over here? So Dawood doesn't have to run back and forth? Yeah. I'll go to Yasin.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. I think part of it is this idea that like kullukum ra'un, like you're all shepherds. For me, I think a lot of that manifests in our responsibility, the communal responsibility that we have, where your everyday sort of can affect and will affect those that are around you. So to some level, regardless of whether you like it or not, like you are responsible for the people around you and their well-being. Like if you show up to the Islamic Center for Halakha and you're smiling, like on the positive end of things, right? Like other people around you will take from your positivity. If you go home and you're really negative and you start yelling at everybody around you, that's going to affect their general mood as well. So I think to some degree, like just as a human being, given the fact that we have connections to those that are around us and that people sort of lean on each other and rely on each other, the way that you are and the way that you present yourself in a public space, that is your responsibility to other people to maintain some level of like a higher standard in that degree.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. To be a shepherd, it's accountability at its finest, really. To be accountable for, let's say, if I've got a child, so I've got to be accountable for my child, but also I've got to be accountable for others that are not my children. So I feel like it's a big responsibility in itself, and you've got to have faith as well in Allah to make sure that you're not leading anyone astray, not even your community. So I'll say that it's responsibility. I'll say that it's accountability, and whew, there's more to it as well. It's like something divine because it's a responsibility. It's not something that you always ask for. It's given to you. It's not always given to you at the time that you want it to. Like I didn't know when my son was gonna come. I didn't have no plan on that whatsoever. However, when he came, I had to be responsible. I had to be accountable. I had to be a shepherd. I had to protect him, get food, get everything that he needs. So I feel like Allah will give you that responsibility when He sees that you're ready for it. It's not when you want it, but when He's ready to, that you're ready to receive His blessing. That's when He's going to give it to you. He doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. That's what I started to realize. So,
Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. I think what I was, or what we were sort of talking about, like the conversation started with sort of understanding about what are the trusts that have been placed in our lives. And for me, I like this juncture, and the person that I was talking about, this juncture in our life, like the most recent thing I remember, like being students, knowledge, and as a mana. And it's very easy, like when you're a student, to just like go through it mindlessly, and it's very difficult to just be a student, and because like they be trying and they be testing you, but there's something to like when you're in college, like, or wherever you are, that they always tell you to remember, like what's your why, what's the reason in which you're doing this, and that sort of helps you bring in your full self and all that stuff. And what I'm trying to say is that like knowledge is like something that is for me like a trust, right? The type of knowledge that you choose to acquire, how you choose to apply it, how you are going about even getting it in the first place, how you are showing up when you are getting it is all part of like this sort of etiquette that kind of matters. And I think what we really need to think about is like also how we apply that knowledge when we do receive it. Is it coming to us and it remains in this place where it's just like egotistical, or it's something that in which we sort of boast about and something that we used to do harm or something that we used to do absolutely nothing with? Or is it something in which like we get it and then it actually changes something within us, and or it causes us to go out and do some sort of positive with the knowledge that we have? And I think in regards to trust, like that's sort of where my mind goes, like because that's the thing I feel like I've been entrusted with.
Good. I want you to think now individually in a reflective, if you have a notebook, right at the top of the notebook. If you have a phone, just pull out a phone, but actually go through the exercise. What are actual trusts that you have that Allah's placed in your life, right? We can talk about this in broader categories, that an amana is a responsibility, promise, information that's confidential, your time, your abilities, your family, your physical body, your iman. But thinking about it for yourself individually, if you were to list out just a list of 5 or 10 different amanas in your life, trusts. Responsibility is an important word because responsibility is different from authority. And authority usually doesn't come first, responsibility comes first. And most of us, if we don't have authoritative titles or positions, we still have a responsibility, right? And a lot of us don't think this way. A shepherd is attentive, so they have to know with a conscious kind of perception, these are the things that I'm looking after, right? So let's take some really thoughtful time right now. I don't want you to think about what gets in the way. I don't want your nafs or shaitan to be defining the list. You don't have to share the list with anybody. Just step number 1, what are actual trusts? And don't jump against the wall to say, here's why I'm not fulfilling it, or here why it's not applicable to me. The things that are actual trusts in your life that Allah has given to you, what are those trusts? Let's spend a couple of minutes right now, no less than 5, but let's try to get to 10, just so we can kind of think about it expansively and see where our minds land in terms of what we think are these types of things in our day-to-day. So individually, if you have a notebook, write it down. Like, what are trusts that Allah has placed in my life? And try to get to 5. Try to get more 5 if you can. And let's do that first for like the next 2-3 minutes. What are trusts Allah has placed in my life? What? Just answer, just do the thing. No questions. Yeah. On an individual level. What are you talking about, man? Just answer the question. She. So if you're just joining us, we're making a list of things that we can say Allah has put into our lives as trusts. Amana. How's that going for people? Is anybody done? You done? Huh? You don't know if you're done? Are you done? Okay. And you know that you're done? It's good. Can you explain to her what it means to be done with the list? Yeah. Has everybody gotten 5 at least? Does anybody still need a little bit more time? Some of you didn't do it. I can tell from your faces. I don't know why you didn't do it. You just take a breath and make sure that a good part of you is what's keeping you from doing it, and not your nafs and not shaitan's waswasa or thinking that you don't need to do it. So whatever list you have right now, I'd like you to think about them. Of those trusts that you listed, which one do you care for actually faithfully, and which ones need more attention? You're just doing it with yourself. Yeah, So which of these trusts do you take care of well, and which ones require more attention? You can just even make like a note next to it. Like, if there's a one you do well, put like a star, a smiley face. If there's a one that you're not doing well, put a sad face next to it. Okay. Now I want you to think, you can reflect on it too and write it down. What are the things that make it easier to do the ones that you treat faithfully? And what are the things that make it harder to do the ones that you could be giving more attention to? Like, what gets in the way of the things that require more attention, and what enhances your ability to honor the ones that you're actually being faithful towards? Okay, so hold that thought for a bit, because we could do the same exercise with the covenants, right? And so the distinction here between what one could describe as an amana versus the ahad, right? Your uhud are things that you are essentially entering into through your own acceptance. And when we understand it at a base level, we can say that the amana asks the question of what has been placed into my care. Does that make sense? What has been placed into my care? And the ahad asks, what have I pledged to uphold? Like, what am I saying I'm going to actually kind of dignify? Do you know? And in those regards, it's important to understand because it breaks down now categorically a moral responsibility in terms of trustworthiness into like one of these two dimensions. There's either things that I have received or things that I've accepted. Like these two things are things that in the prism of ra'un, right? كلكم راء وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته, that all of you are shepherds and all of you are responsible for your flocks. That notion of responsibility becomes important in the prism of a shepherd's attentiveness and focus, but also the second quality that goes into this is accountability. So I can understand if I give this water to Yasin as an amana, and it has the criteria of him watching over it and me giving him a sense of responsibility towards it and him upholding the responsibility, and then he gives it back to me, right? If you wrote down a list of things that are the 10 things that came to mind, the 5 things, the amanat that are coming to your mind, some of them are not just the same as me giving a bottle of water to Yasin and Yasin giving it back to me. You could think about this very tangibly as Khalid owns the water. Yasin looks after the water that Khalid gave to him that was Khalid's, and then he gave it back to him, and that's how the transaction goes. If the amana is your physical body, and you were given that, who does it then go back to? Does this make sense? And you have to answer that question because in our tradition, the spiritual axioms that we exert an understanding through theologically is that everything belongs to Allah. It's not meant to be hyperbolic or something that's just poetic, but at a base understanding theologically, like none of it is yours to begin with. Your money, your wealth, your children, your possessions, none of it was you. I am not the provider of my children. Allah is the provider. I can be the means of provision, but provision comes from Ar-Razak. That's not me. That is the divine. I'm in a place where things that I have, clothes, like cars, houses, whatever else, they can be things that I have in a temporary nature, but they're still entrusted to me and they are going to be ultimately given back. So responsibility and accountability. The shepherd is accountable for every single sheep. When you go back to the client is going to say to the shepherd, I gave you 30, but you came back with 29. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he comes upon a Bedouin who has sheep in his possession. And he wants to test his faith, his iman. This is a question of iman. It's not a question of practice. You could bow and prostrate as many times as you want. It doesn't mean that iman is defining the postures of prayer. Faith in Allah is a separate thing than prayer and fasting and all of the things that are ritual. The rituals can be done, but they still need to have the inward component. Abdullah ibn Umar goes to this man and wants to see where his faith is. And he says to him that, hey, I have a need because my provision has gone low for some food. Can you give me one of these sheep? The shepherd says, I've been entrusted to look after them. I have to return them to their owner. And he says that I gave a proposition to this man that why don't you sell me the sheep? I'll pay you for it. Tell the owner that a predator came and took it away. He will be none the wiser. You will have made money and I will have benefited. And he says that this man said to me, in response to this proposition, something that stuck with me till the end of my life. In the formula that he offered of worldly increase, the shepherd's response was, Fa'ain Allah, where is God in your formula? So in understanding the element of giving back something now that's an amana, none of it was mine to begin with. The kid is not mine in the sense that I am my child's father, but ultimately all of us return back to Allah. The things that we're offered of an element of impermanence to them in relation to what has permanency, and these two elements that are embodied in the word ra'un, that is about shepherding, responsibility, not in a vacuum, but accountability in relation to responsibility. And that accountability fundamentally is not just, Yassine, why didn't you give my water back? But Yassine will ultimately be in a place where he will have to answer the question to Allah, why did he not do right by me? Or I will have to answer the question to Allah, why did I ask him to do something that he didn't have the ability to do? And it comes back to the divine at every element. You think how you sleep is just your decision, but your body will speak on the day of judgment. Allah grant us ease on that day. How you eat, you can think through purely the satisfaction of a stomach, or you can think about it through the prism of a heart. You can get to a place where you think that responsibility is about just doing whatever somebody else tells you to do. Or you think about it from the standpoint of the formation of your own ethics and values. And sometimes it's hard, but the most shepherding thing you could do is actually let somebody know that they're going in the wrong direction. Do you get what I mean? Let's do this for a minute. Turn to the persons next to you. What are the things that you came up with that make it easier to uphold the amanat that you listed, that you do faithfully? And what are the things that get in the way that make it more difficult, that take away attention or make it harder to be attentive towards the ones that you are not as attentive towards as you could be? Do you get what I mean? And not in the prism of, and we want to think about it holistically, right? By the standards of what we get exposed to socially here. I don't know why we think about marriage and children and houses and cars and everything the way that we do, but a good chunk of it is rooted in terms of systems that are not rooted in the Sunnah, right? Anti-black systems, systems of whiteness. They make us have really obscure ideas of what it means to be accepted and belonged. The Prophet teaches us, Allah teaches us, that all of you are beautiful. You don't pursue like physical wellness in an intentionality of vanity, but an intentionality of wellness. Do you know? What are the things that make it difficult to have attentiveness towards that element of shepherding of the amanat? And what are the things that make it easier, that allow for me to be faithful in it? The company I keep, the circumstances I'm in, the environment around me, all kinds of things can contribute to it. It's not simply just because I'm a bad person or a good person. Don't trivialize. Some of it might be that. Some of it might be that I'm just not a good dad to my son. And culture and grandparents and whoever else can say whatever they want to, they might also not be good parents to their children. But a lot of it also comes from external things that we want to be able to think, where do I thrive and where do I feel suffocated? And where am I just negligent without excuse? And where are the things that make it harder? Let's turn to the persons next to us. What are the circumstances that allow for me to be more faithful to my trusts? And what are the things that make it a little bit harder? Let's talk about it a bit and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, what are we talking about? What makes it easier to keep certain ones, and what makes it harder to be attentive towards others? What are we discussing? Yeah, go ahead. Behind
So, so I wrote a couple of items such as my gaze, my speech, my heart, and also my prayers. And those are all amanas where I find prayer to be easier to control compared to the other three. And the reason being is the community that I come from is uh, like a Muslim community where we foster like the idea of coming to the masjid and having a good time and things like that. So it always like has a good connotation. Since I was younger, I kind of like continued that practice. The others are tougher just because of what I'm exposed to day, like watching a bad movie, might have a bad scene and things like that, which harder to control. Yeah.
Okay. Other thoughts? What makes it easy? What makes it difficult?
Assalamualaikum. I feel like the responsibilities that I am able to uphold are because they've been integrated into a sort of routine in my daily life, like let's say salah, right? So once that's like once my routine is structured in such a way that it has room for those responsibilities, those just like fall into place. And then the ones that um, I'm not able to uphold, I suppose the opposite goes for that. Like there's no set time for those, and so they get neglected. So
Great. Other thoughts? If you want to pass it back.
Yeah, we were talking about it, and I think, at least for me, the things that that concern me but that don't affect others are sometimes easier to deal with, I feel like. But then those where our amana is towards someone else, I felt like these are sometimes more difficult to deal with. And then also another distinction we talked about was the amanas where we see perhaps more immediate results. We do something and we see the fruits of that labor. It's easier to shepherd, but those where we might not even see the results in this lifetime or for a very long time, they are usually more difficult.
You want to say something?
So, Assalamu alaikum. So, I have written what makes number one easy for me is that I hold those with great honor, with passion, and with great respect. So it makes it easy for me to do my easier amanas. And then the ones that are harder to honor, um, I have bad habits around it, and I'm just not being consistent enough. And that one is body. So it's like number 5 was harder for me to honor because I had bad habits around it, and I'm just not being consistent with taking care of myself as much as I should. So the ones that's easier, it's just, I have more passion about it, I have more respect for it, I have more honor. And then the one that not so much, like you said, just didn't make the time for it, to schedule it into the routine.
So if I don't make time for something, does that mean that I'm absolved of responsibility or accountability around it? Do you know? I mean, it's like an individual question, right? Like, if there's certain things that need to be taken care of by me, every so often someone might slip up, right? It's the nature of our kind of existence as humans. Allah make it easy. The companions weren't perfect people. The goal of Islam is not the pursuit of perfection. People are going to struggle. They're going to slip up. But if I'm in a place where I just am not attentive towards it, I just exist in a denial of it. Do you see? If we look at how this characteristic trait is positioned, you have all kinds of verses that come before it that talk about things that have a very kind of private or secret element to it. Do you know? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, indeed the believers have succeeded. الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ, those who have khushu' in their prayer. Can you see my khushu'? No, right? Can you see your own khushu'? Like, no. Do you know? It's a very inward, internal thing. Do you know? وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. These things also still have elements of privacy to them. But when you're talking about prayer that has focus, an individual that moves away from those things that are futile, the person who is a doer of zakah, the one who is a guarder of their chastity, right? We're talking about someone who has attentive, focus, reverent awe, the ability to move away from that which is frivolous. They inwardly purify themselves. They have generosity. they're in a place where they have self-restraint and chastity. The idea of these verses preceding this verse, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ, when you do all that stuff, it should be producing a certain type of human being. You know? If you have focus in your prayer and you're avoiding what's futile and you're in a place of self-restraint and generosity and this kind of stuff, consequently, it should make you a trustworthy person. Like somebody who sees truth as truth and falsehood as falsehood, and is also in a place where you cannot be mistrusted. Like even the mushrikeen of Mecca, the Prophet, before he left to migrate to Medina, he gave them back all their stuff. And they used to have him look after their stuff because they knew that they could trust him in taking care of his stuff. Even when they were staunchly opposed to him being a Muslim, propagating Islam, they couldn't doubt his integrity. They couldn't doubt his honesty. When you think about like what they accused him of when they didn't know what to do. Our God for a day, yours for a day, ours for a day, yours for a week, ours for a day, yours, right? Like let's say he's a magician, let's say he's a soothsayer, let's say he's gone crazy, you know? Nobody's saying, let's just say he lies. Because nobody knows him to be, like you can't claim that he's a liar. And when you think about the positioning of this verse, not as characteristic number one, but also that there's continuity, if you're doing all of this stuff and you are still a dishonest person, you might not be doing the stuff well. You're praying your prayers and you still lie. You're praying your prayers and you're still lacking trustworthiness. You still don't fulfill trusts. You might have to revisit if you're doing your prayer properly. You might have to revisit, like, are you actually doing zakah the way it's supposed to be? Do you get what I mean? The progression is that the yield of this, it's supposed to produce a certain type of person, a person that a person feels secure being around, safe around. Somebody who, when you ask of them, you know they're going to uphold the trust. Individually, you don't want to take on more responsibility than you're able to handle. I'm in a place right now, since I went to Uganda and I got denied entry, right? Some of us were supposed to go to Uganda together. You went, I did not go, right? I haven't traveled since that time. Prior to, I went in and out of the country alone, not just traveling for speaking engagements and other stuff in this country. I went on 12 international trips. And at the end of it, I had never been more behind on things than I'd ever been before. The number of people who would reach out to me to ask me for help and assistance on things that I can make claims of transitions and adapting and not having an office and whatever else, I still wasn't getting done what I needed to get done. And my responsibility here came way before my responsibility anywhere else. Is there a way to measure those things? I don't know, but fundamentally, I have to think. There's hadith, the Prophet goes on Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. He's shown a lot of different things when he's on this majestic night journey. And when the angel Jibreel is teaching him through what it is that he's being shown, there's a man who he is shown who's carrying a pile of sticks of wood, and he's having difficulty holding this, and he continues to take on more sticks, even though he can't already hold what he's holding. When the angel Jibreel conveys what this means, he says that this is a person who has taken on responsibilities he cannot uphold, he can't uphold, and he's taking on more responsibilities, right? Why? Do you know? I can't understand it until I'm immersed in it, and then I have to work my way out of it. But there was a lot of people who asked me to do certain things that I just wasn't getting done properly. And then in the midst of it, from an exhaustion level, I had also stopped going to the gym. My eating habits got really crazy. I wasn't doing right by me. And a lot of you know some of the things that I do by practice that some of us do together. I had stopped fasting on certain days of the week outside of Ramadan. The commitment to doing things that were beyond the fara'id, I was starting to wane on. It created a gradual progression that wasn't about anything other than, hey, I got to make sure that I can actually uphold the responsibilities that I'm taking on. And part of that has to be rooted in a sense of self that is where I'm at now in relation to where I'd like to be in the long term. But there's no honor in just continuing to say yes to things when I'm not even doing the things that I've already said I'm going to do. Do you see? Upholding those responsibilities in these prisms. The amana is something that you were entrusted with, you were given, and the ahad is something that you willfully chose to enter into. You accepted it, you didn't just receive it. Does that make sense? If we were to illustrate this from the standpoint of examples that come to us through these three ways that we can understand responsibility and accountability, through the amana and the uhud. There's how I relate to Allah, how I relate to myself, and how I relate to others. Those first characteristics being a lot of stuff that's just about you individually or in private. Now is giving a characteristic, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ, that's about how you behave with others. And the amanatihim, the him is telling us there's diverse trusts. Your trust might not be the same as someone else's. But think about it from the standpoint of category one, how I relate to Allah. Examples of an amana that are in my relationship with Allah. Allah has entrusted me with certain things. I received them. Allah gave me life. He gave me intellect. He gave me revelation. He gave me human agency and free will. He's given me irada, sheer will and determination, comprehension and capacity, wealth and opportunities. All of this are amana from Allah. Does that make sense? The uhud, things that I then in turn pledge to in relation to my relationship with Allah, because I'm going to be answered for how I cared about the gifts, but what I pledge to the divine is to worship him alone, to obey him, to follow his messenger, and to fulfill the things that are obligatory upon me. The farda'ain are individual obligations. Your prayer, your fasting, your charity, your pilgrimage. That's one bucket of obligation. The second bucket of obligation, foundational theology. Who are you praying to? Do you know? The third bucket, some fundamental understanding of self-purification, how you take care of your heart. And then fourth, as an obligation, you understand how Islam applies to what it is that you are bringing into your life. What does Islam say about the job that you're pursuing? What does Islam say about these new responsibilities you're bringing in? But the distinction between the amana, what I received, and how I care for it, and the uhud, what I've pledged to in return, and how it is that I will be faithful to that covenant, right? So whether or not I only worship Allah, or I worship money, or I worship physical beauty, or I worship the validation of others, or I worship my emotions, I worship my anxieties, I worship these things, I give them the place of God, I worship the idea of self-sufficiency, I worship modern day idols, I worship my nationality, my culture, my race. These are foolish things to worship, but Allah still has given me intellect. My intellect is not predicated on my worship of him. They're two separate things. The amana is not transactional, it's just given. I now get to choose what I claim through the acceptance of La ilaha illallah. Does that make sense? And you can apply this type of framework to beyond Allah, what is an amana and what is an ahad, in how I relate to myself and how I relate to others. And the verses are building up an individual that if you are to adopt these characteristics, they will produce somebody who is trustworthy and somebody feels safe around. Somebody doesn't have to worry about them gossiping or backbiting or sharing their secrets, stabbing them in the back, saying things out of anger or irrational emotion, or validating what is not justifiable. Do you see? You claim to follow the Prophet, then you're upholding certain things. And the upholding of these trusts are demonstrated again and again and again. The amana is what comes to you, and the ahad is what proceeds from you. Do you see the distinction? An amana is a trust you receive. The ahad is a promise that you give. So how are you using the trusts, right? Allah didn't give you the ability to think to hate on yourself. He didn't give you the ability to think to hate on other people too, right? Spiritual gifts are given as gifts to be thoughtful about, what does the gift giver want me to use these? How does he want me to use them? You know, if I give Yasin the bottle of water to look after, it's not so that he then drinks it and fills it up with other water and then gives it back to me. Do you know? If the bottle broke or the water spilled out, or he came upon somebody who was really thirsty and needed water and he used it and then replaced it, that has a different question of ethics. If he couldn't come in contact with me to ask me, and it was the only water that was available, if somebody was choking next to him, these are different things, right? And so it doesn't have like a blanket cookie cutter application. In order for you to be a believer, you have to know what you believe in. And if you don't know what you believe in, it doesn't mean that the prayer in and of itself is not supposed to be performed, but you won't know if trustworthiness is important to you if you've never asked yourself if that's something that's important to you. And then you won't know if honoring a pledge to Allah is important if you don't ever really think about your relationship with Allah and what it means to fulfill the things that are embedded in the promise of La ilaha illallah. Let's look at this verse really quick. So we're gonna look at Surah Al-Ahzab. It's 72nd verse. So this is the 33rd chapter of the Quran, verse 72. I just put it in the WhatsApp group. Can somebody read it? Arabic, English? Yeah, go ahead, Yasin.
Can I just do the English?
Sure.
Indeed, we offered the trust to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they all declined to bear, being fearful of it. But humanity assumed it, for they are truly wrongful to themselves and ignorant of the consequences.
Okay. Are you looking at one of the files behind you to see? How does he know you're talking to him? Do you want to ask one of them to read it?
إنا عرضنا الأمانة على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملها الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا.
A lot of us have heard this verse before. Samana was given to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains. Three very particular things that are known for their vastness and their magnitude, right? They have a capacity and they refuse to take on this amana, but humanity takes it on. The nature of this verse that's talking to us about our ability to uphold, we can extrapolate from it. The latter part of it that's talking about humanity in a way through our being inept and foolish is in relation to how we respond to amanas. Either we are taking on trust that we don't have the ability to, which is a foolish act, or we have taken on a trust and we abuse the trust. We abuse the authority and the power. And you see this every single day. People take on roles and responsibilities that don't make any sense. Whether you think he is somebody you agree with or not, Zoran Mamdani is a good mayor. Like, he makes sense to be a mayor. Do you get what I mean? There's a lot of people who run for offices that come and they're like, hey, can you help us with this and that? We're Muslim, you're Muslim. And I'm like, being Muslim is not the quality that makes you a good elected official. That's not what's gonna be what it is. Do you know? Right? They shouldn't do it. There's a lot of people who take on responsibility and they don't do it right. How can you be a parent that fears God and you mistreat your child? It's foolishness. It shows an inequity and an injustice that you don't do right by the knowledge that you have. You take knowledge and you weaponize it to elevate yourself by denigrating other people. That's not okay. But the part that we want to understand is that here the verse is telling us that this was offered specifically to these three things in creation, right? The heavens, the earth, and the mountains. It doesn't say that it was actually offered to humanity. And there's a lot of different interpretations as to how did humanity get this responsibility. Allah knows best. Some would say that Adam alayhi salam was given it and that we inherit it through his acceptance of it. But you want to think about what makes us distinct from these other parts of creation, that we have the ability to uphold characteristically the trust, the amana. And if somebody doesn't have these things, then they don't have accountability towards trust in that way. And it's not whether they do it or not, but they have the ability to do it. Three things that we have as humans characteristically that enable us to actually do right by the amanat and the uhud in our lives. One, we have what's called irada, or sheer will and determination. All of us were born into this world. None of us just came from nothing. Do you know? I don't know everybody in the room. I'm not going to make a blanket statement that everybody has a good mother and father. But let's assume the generalization that most of us as babies had at least one parent, if not two, that put themselves through sleepless nights, pushed themselves past exhaustion, woke up in the middle of the night at their wits' end to nurse, feed, hold, walk around, carry, whatever to a baby, right? How do they do that? When you think you don't have anything and you still do, how do you do that? That's irada, sheer will and determination. We're not a religion that tells us to worship feelings. Motivation itself is also not the variable that a believer seeks to be moved by. It's discipline. You don't get up for Fajr because you feel like it. You get up for Fajr because you're supposed to pray Fajr. It's not whether you're motivated to or like the Kaaba is in front of you. You pray Fajr whether you're sitting in the middle of the West Village or you're sitting in Mecca or anything in between. Discipline. Irada is something that humanity has as a characteristic. Sheer will and determination. You got to figure out what enhances yours and what is it that suffocates yours. what moves you to do and what keeps you from doing what you have the ability to do. But one of the reasons characteristically we are able to uphold and have accountability towards trust and promises is because we have the ability of sheer will and determination, irada. You can actually do certain things that you can tell yourself you can't do, and you can actually do also certain things in circumstances that people would say, how is that humanly possible? I have seen people in the rubble of earthquake aftermath go without days of sleep, sleeping in the streets, sleeping in cars, not bathing, not showering, just trying to get people out of places that potentially they will have survived. They'll reward them for being what they are. How? How does a doctor choose to willfully go into a hospital every single day in the middle of the COVID pandemic? How? How do they do that? Irada, sheer will and determination. It's not that they just simply don't have knowledge. I'm not faulting anybody. I had close friends of mine who were doctors who called me up and they were like, hey, COVID hit New York. I moved someplace else. I wasn't trying to get sick. You could say how selfish, but you don't know what it's like to be in that place if you've never been in that place. But I also had doctors from this community. Khalid, today I lost 75 patients. Today I lost 86 patients. Today I lost 102 patients. How do they keep getting up and going back? How? What are they built of? Well, they have this thing, irada, sheer will and determination. What kills ours? Exhaustion, futility, lahu, desire, all the stuff that was talked about before. What enhances it? Khushu', having a sense of reverent awe. But here, that's bucket number one, irada. What's the state of yours? Have you thought about it? 2, how can we have an upholding of these things? We've been given the ability to comprehend. If I say to him, hold my water, look after it for me, he has to be able to comprehend like the responsibility that's being asked of him, right? There's a factor of comprehension. If I went to a dog or a cow and I said, look after my water, the dog might look after the sheep. Is the cow going to look after the sheep? Maybe not. Do you know? But comprehension is something that we have the ability to ascertain, even if we don't understand it in the moment. My wife, before she left, she said to me, amongst many things, that, hey, the vent in the dryer needs to be cleaned out. And I was looking at her like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. And then when we lived in New York, we had a washer dryer in our apartment, but because in our Manhattan apartment, they put this in, but it wasn't linked to anything, the tube that the lint came out of was in a bucket on a dresser on in our bedroom, like in a smaller room. If any of you ever came to our place when we lived in the city, and you saw that small room in our bedroom, that's where that thing was. And then she said to me, do you remember the dryer and the tube that came out of the dryer and the cup that the tube went into, and we had to keep emptying it out and cleaning it? I said, yeah. And she said, that's what you're trying to clean right now. And I said to her, that was so well articulated. And she looked at me and she said, are you being sarcastic? And I said, no, that was really great. I understand completely now what you want me to do. Comprehension. We have this ability. There's certain things that we just individually might not have the faculties to understand. When I was an undergrad at New York University, they had core requirements that you had to take. One was called Natural Science 1 and 2. Some of you went to NYU, you might have done these classes, but not 2 of them. I had to do 2. The first class I took as a first-year student was called Energy and the Environment, and part of my assignments was drawing the color spectrum. It's great, not a hard thing. In my senior year, because I had not taken any other of my core requirements. I was now taking classes that first-year students were. And I didn't know I had to take this class, so I took the last one that was available, and it was natural science, human genetics. 1,000,000 times harder than energy in the environment. I now had to do like all kinds of stuff. I didn't know what I was doing whatsoever. I didn't have the skill set to comprehend it. I didn't have to hate on myself. I was just trying my best at the end of all of it. Do you get what I mean? There's certain things that some of us just understand better than others. And there's certain things that we have the ability to understand, but we're not exerting the effort. We're not taking our sheer will and determination, and we've landed at the excuse and said that the excuse justifies me not doing what I have the ability to do. Do you know? You could actually learn what Surah Fatiha means. It's Arabic. If you've told yourself for the last 15 years, I don't know Arabic, you don't have to know Arabic to understand what the Quran is saying. But something is suffocating the sheer will and determination. And if it's preventing comprehension, somebody said to me, like, do brain surgery. I don't know how to do that. But if someone is asking me to do something I have capacity towards, comprehension becomes a second variable in my ability to uphold the trust. And then the third characteristic is actual capacity. And this is where accountability gets lifted. My father was a doctor. He ran around for 40 years as a cardiologist. I probably indirectly learned so much about generosity and selflessness from my father that when he had his stroke initially, and I went back to my hometown and went to all these different places that I hadn't been, local stores, the barber shop, pharmacies, grocery stores, every person that saw me, because I looked like my dad, said to me, how's your dad doing? And then told me a story of how my father gave medicine to their sick parents who didn't have insurance or showed up in the middle of the night to help them understand something that they were going through. May Allah grant all of our loved ones healing and an ultimate shifa. In understanding capacity, after his stroke, my father is left paralyzed on the right side of his body without the ability to speak. He doesn't have the ability literally to do certain things. Do you get what I mean? Capacity is not measured by what I think I can do. Because the Quran speaks and teaches us through all of its verses, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, that Allah does not place upon an individual a burden greater than their ability to bear. Society might place upon you burdens that you can't bear. Allah does not place burdens upon you that you can't bear. But how do you know what your ability to bear is? A big part of prophetic mission was rooted in the embrace of the potential of public failure. Every prophet of God did not have billions of followers. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his ummah, Musa ﷺ, is shown in the tablets, and he becomes envious of it, the numbers of people, right? May Allah honor us to be from amongst the ummah of the Prophet on the Day of Judgment. Some prophets didn't have even an iota of those numbers, but they still got up every single day and worked to their capacity because they didn't care what people thought about them. When you live in a world that enables you to simply just swipe right and swipe left and not learn through rejection and not challenge fear and not know how to deal with failure, and you're always afraid of what people will think, and you're in a place where you don't know how to deal with public image in a certain way, capacity gets inhibited, not because I can't do, but I've told myself that I cannot do. It's different from my father being paralyzed. May Allah grant him shifa. I can't dunk a basketball. I'm 5'2". Yassine could hold me on his shoulders, and then I could dunk the basketball. Do you know? When I was younger and I was more athletic, I could jump really high. I still couldn't dunk the ball, but I could get pretty close for my height in a remarkable way. I'm now 43. I can't do that mess. Capacity shifts over time. There were some people when they were younger, they could do things, and as they get older, they can't. An aunt of mine traveled with us for Umrah, not this last time, but 2 times ago. She's in her 80s. My uncle did not come with her. And she said every 2 years they try to either do Hajj or Umrah. May Allah accept it from them and all of us. And on this last trip, my aunt, she was with us. She had a good time. And she sat with me one of the nights and she said, I've realized that this is going to be the last time I'll ever be able to make this journey. So I just don't have the physical ability to do it anymore. Capacity changes. But prior to when capacity is there, you uphold the trust. Do you see? You don't wait till capacity is no longer possible to then have unhealthy remorse about why didn't I get done what I could have gotten done when I had the ability to do it. Does this make sense? 3 variables give us the condition to be able to uphold. We have the ability to comprehend, we have the ability to have capacity, and we have the ability through sheer will and determination. And when I have attentiveness and I actually shepherd trusts, I don't see things as burdens the way whiteness makes us see things as burdens. Whiteness wants us to believe that people who are poor are a burden, elders are a burden. Anti-blackness wants us to believe. Egocentricity wants us to believe these types of things through perception. They want us to believe that those who are uninsured, refugees, they're burdens. Our religion doesn't teach us to see people this way. And then it has us be challenged. As shepherds, you look at people with love and compassion, attentiveness, that this is a flock. And how do I understand it through that prism? It's really hard to care for others in that way if you don't really care for yourself the way you're supposed to. If you allow for bitterness and hardness to envelop your heart, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ. The characteristics are not seen separated, they're seen together. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. You don't have the time to take care of trust, but you could scroll for 3 hours a day. Do you get what I mean? Let's do this. What are you taking away so far? What is it bringing up for you? This part of the conversation. Let's turn to the persons next to us and talk about it a bit, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, what are we discussing? What are we taking away so far? What's coming up for people? Any thoughts? What time is Maghrib today? 8:31. This class went a lot longer than the last 3 weeks. I feel like it's better we end at 7:30, right? 7:45. Right? Isn't it better to end early? Huh? No. First of all, a lot of people in this section I saw with their eyes closed for longer than the blink of an eye. So unless the reason you want to keep it longer is because this is where you get a nice nap in. What do we discuss? What do we talk about? And then we'll make dua in a bit. Mariam, you look like you want to say something. Why? This is the most stressful halakha you've ever been in your life?
Sorry. Yes, I think that this is the most stressful halakha I've ever been in my life because I don't really feel like I'm doing a good job on any of these. I don't know if that's because I'm truly not doing well in them or because I'm just really hard on myself. But I feel like I could improve in like every one of the amounts that I listed, and it's really stressing me out.
Well,
Does anyone else feel like that? Oh, good. Oh, thank God. Okay.
you and Yusra and Yassine can have a support group together. That would be great. I wonder what that conversation would be like. Go ahead. You can do yoga with you at the same time. Were you gonna say something?
I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that this very similar actually. I think there's a lot of this connects to a lot of things that I've been thinking about recently in terms of just like how I could struggling to figure out how I could be doing better. Feeling like I'm not doing enough in respects to maintaining my amana across like all these different fields. Like respecting my body with sleep, but also doing the things that I love to do. respecting my family, like taking better care of my family, spending more time with them, also making more money so I can support them, but also trying to find something that I actually want to do. So that also goes back to taking care of myself. I feel like it's a big balancing game, figuring out how to take care of all the minors that were entrusted with your life. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I still got a lot to learn. So I'm struggling with that. But yeah.
To what Yassine said about the balancing game, Zainab and I were talking about that because for some reason we're kind of programmed that we're working really hard on one amana. And like, let's say for an example, we have 5 buckets and there's like $0 in 4 of the buckets, but there's 101. So we're like, okay, at least we're succeeding in this one bucket. But if there's 20 bucks in each bucket, we're like, oh no, none of the buckets are full. So we feel like we're kind of failing. When I'm trying to balance everything, I kind of feel like I'm failing. But at least if I'm going really hard on one, I'm like, well, at least that one is good. And right now, I'm trying to balance, and usually I don't do that in my life, and I have a feeling that might be why I feel like I'm failing at all of them.
At least you're trying, right? And there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but I couldn't tell you with specifics. We can talk about it later if you'd like, but huh? Well, it's just, there's a lot of specifics to it, I guess. Yeah, go ahead. It's off. She turned it off.
So I was thinking about how this is the first time I've sat down with the concept of al-ahad. I know it as the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like being the indivisible. But I was thinking a lot about how Bilal ibn Rabah, like how his last words, or not his last words, but like his words when he was being tortured, what he knew of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being al-ahad. And so it made me reflect about the deeper meaning of him calling out those words.
This is a different word.
Different word?
This one starts with ayn.
Okay.
Yeah, and that one starts with a alif.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It still has some. There's some. But yeah, go ahead.
I was also thinking about like the first thing I wrote was like the visions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you, and how, and relating to what you're saying, like how if one thing is lacking, I can't take care of the other amana. And so how do I relate this larger theme of an ahad, or like the pledges I'm making to myself, and sort of navigating when you feel like you failed at that, and also the progress. Because for the exercise, I put halfway there. I didn't put a smiley face. I didn't put an X. I put halfway there, knowing that there's some sort of progress. So if anyone has any thoughts about that.
Well, you want to have people that you talk to, right? Mentors, advisors, teachers, friends, but people that you can kind of open up to so you're not holding things all on your own. It's very purposeful for us as minorities to always feel overwhelmed and feel like we're behind and feel like we're struggling. So to be able to delineate and really acknowledge, like, hey, no, you're actually doing a good job. Or no, actually, you're really terrible at this. Like, you're not a good friend. You know what I mean? You might think you're doing fine, but you're actually not doing fine. Or you're a great friend, you know? The whole purpose of these verses are to be self-reflective, which is different from being self-deprecating, but to be open to certain realities, right? I have to be able to acknowledge at some point I can continue in a haphazard way, or I can understand that responsibility doesn't come, especially where there's a power imbalance, you know? The number of times over the last 6 months, I, every 2 weeks, sat down and sent emails to people saying, I'm sorry for the late reply. Is there still something I can be helpful with? At some point, I have to wake up to the reality that I'm not doing right by something. Do you get what I mean? And people can make excuses and it's busy and this and that. somebody texted me the other day and said they have a relative who's not in a good place that feels bad at reaching out because they see like how much humanitarian work that you do. Like literally the over kind of travel internationally, regardless of the output, became something that they were very nice about, but said they didn't want to get in the way of that. That's like the opposite of what we're trying to build here. Do you know what I mean? So I have to catch myself without hating on myself to be productive in kind of removing or augmenting and then really determining. There's no fundamental way at this juncture I can have 100 buckets of things in my life. There's gonna be a lot of people who are gonna say, we would love for you to do this and do that and do this and do that. I don't have to do everything. And there's a lot of stuff that I could do that somebody else could do just as well, if not better, that like I don't have actually a particular value add to. That's still time that if it's allocated here, it's not going to be allocated elsewhere. So it's okay to say no to certain things in order to say yes to other things. But the consequences of those behaviors are not going to be acknowledged if I don't actually own up to it. Did you want to say something? You just hold in the mic? Okay, let's do this. Maghrib's going to come in about 10 minutes. We'll make dua in a bit. We're going to probably wrap this up next Monday. And I think it went on a lot longer than it was supposed to. I appreciate all of you sticking through it. Those of you who are online, those of you who are showing up in person. This is supposed to be like a very quick thing, and it wasn't. Something also that I have to figure out and work on. But after that, I'm going to be around in the last week of July into August. Right now, I'm intending to be away probably for a couple of weeks, but just to give people a heads up. And we'll replace the programming with something else. And then start something new going into the fall, inshallah. We started a new class with Imam Ibad, who's here right now on Wednesdays, Tafsir Surah Yusuf. I heard last Wednesday was amazing, mashallah. You should definitely try to come this Wednesday if you can. And each class doesn't require attendance on the previous week to come. So if you missed last week, you can still come this Wednesday. And then there'll be a couple of things that I'm going to try to do on the weekends going forward. People want to keep out an eye for that. We're going to close the applications for our trip to Egypt to do relief work with orphans from Gaza in September soon. So if you're intending to join or apply to join, please do that quick because we've got a very large response to it. We're planning to do another relief trip, I think in November, to do work in Pakistan, school children, orphans, other projects there. We'll probably start advertising that before the end of July, like the middle of July, inshallah. With more details on that. And for 2027, we're going to do a bunch of these humanitarian trips. I'm hoping we'll also plan a trip to Palestine, if possible. May Allah end the genocidal violence and make us a generation that witnesses a free Palestine in our lifetime. Some more retreats. We didn't do the New Mexico retreat this year for different reasons, but we intend to do it next September 2027. And we're hoping that we'll, inshallah, get kind of everything up and running. So just so people have those things kind of in the back of their heads. We put out on Sunday, yesterday, an email with some job postings for the IC. I would really love everyone's help in a few things. One, if you feel like you would be good for any of those roles, you should apply. Apply soon. We're going to give hiring on a rolling basis, but priority will be given to candidates who apply by July 10th, just because we got to get things going now. And two, if you can spread and share widely with people in your networks. These will be full-time roles with full benefits, but really we just need like the right people in these places. And the more each of us is just putting it out, on our social media, texting it to people. This is your community. Like, you have to love it enough to also spread the word, to try to get the best people to be in service of the community. In the second round, we're going to look to hire like teachers, various roles, and start that process over the next couple of years of construction, building out at an ideation level. So it's really important that we have the right people who are helping us put systems in place and do the collection for programming. So if you know people who would be good, like, go and talk to them about it. Not as like a hobby, but like they want to get in deep and help us really build, and they have the skill set and the knowledge base to do that. If you know people who are not having a good time in their corporate job and they have the skill set to do certain things, you know people who are working at other nonprofits, I don't have any problems. I'm a pretty shameless person. We will go and poach them and have them come. We want the best people working in our community, but we need everybody to help get the word out that we're looking for people. So err on the side of telling more people than not, so that more people see the postings and we get more people to apply and get the right people's eyes on it. These are in-person roles. They will have some opportunity of hybrid element because, like myself, there's no offices here right now, do you know? But we will need people to be in New York. We can't have them be like in other part of the world to be in these roles. So please do try to spread the word on that. That would be very much so appreciated, inshallah. And then lastly, I think I told some people last week, but if anybody's free after Maghrib and they want to get dinner somewhere, nobody is in my house for the next 2 months. So I don't have any place to go to other than an empty home. So if anybody wants to eat with me after Maghrib, I'm going to probably eat somewhere around here, and we could figure that out. Me and Imran are going to go eat. Imran just woke up 10 minutes ago. He was one of the people whose eyes were closed for longer than a blink. And he woke up just to say that he's going to go to eat dinner. So if any one of you wants to join us, feel free to do that, inshallah. Let's make dua just to close out. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma laka alhamdu kama yanbaghi liwajhika wa din sultanik. Laka alhamdu hamdan tahiran tayyiban mubarakan fihi ila yawmiddin. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. We begin this supplication in your name, Ya Allah, and beseech you to send your choicest salutations upon your most beloved, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. We turn to you, Ya Rabbi, the most faithful, the grantor of security. Before we knew your name, you knew ours. Before we took our first breath, you surrounded us with trusts. You entrusted us with hearts that can love, minds that can reason, tongues that can speak truth, hands that can serve, and souls that can know you. None of it belongs to us. Everything returns to you. Ya Allah, do not let us stand before you having guarded our possessions while neglecting the trust you placed within us. Teach us to protect our faith before our reputation, our character before our comfort, and our relationship with you before the approval of creation. Make us amongst those who carry every amana with reverence, not because people are watching, but because we know you never look away. Ya Allah, forgive us for every promise we made too casually, for every responsibility we delayed, for every trust we neglected, for every confidence we betrayed, for every blessing we treated as though it belonged to us, for every moment we forgot that we would one day return everything to you. Ya Allah, our lives are a collection of borrowed gifts. Our children are yours before they are ours. Our wealth is yours before it is ours. Our knowledge is yours before it is ours. Our time is yours before it is ours. Even these hearts beating within our chests are only entrusted to us for a little while. Do not let us forget the one to whom every trust must be returned. Ya Rabbi, make us people whose word carries weight because it is rooted in truth. Make us people who keep their promises even when it is difficult, who choose honesty when deception seems easier, who fulfill commitments when no one would notice if we walked away, who protect the dignity of others in their presence and in their absence, who never exploit the trust that love places in our hands. O turner of hearts, keep us faithful to the greatest covenant of all, the covenant to worship you alone, to remember you, to love you, to obey you, and to return to you with hearts that have not forgotten why they were created. When this world tempts us to compromise on our principles, remind us that no worldly gain is worth the loss of your pleasure. When we are tired, Ya Allah, strengthen us. When we are distracted, awaken us. When we are heedless, call us back before our hearts grow hard. Make us a source of safety in a world filled with fear, a source of honesty in a world clouded by deception, a source of mercy in a world wounded by cruelty. Let those who meet us feel respected. Let those who know us feel secure. Let those who trust us never regret it. And let every promise we keep become a testimony that our faith is alive. Ya Allah, when the day comes that every secret is uncovered and every trust is accounted for, let us not come empty-handed. Let us come carrying hearts that remain faithful, tongues that spoke truth, hands that served creation, eyes that lowered themselves before your majesty, lives that reflected the beauty of the trust you gave us. And when you ask us what we did with all that you entrusted to our care, allow us to answer not with perfection, but with sincerity. By your rahmah, Ya Rabbi, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen, accept our imperfect striving. Repair what we have broken, complete what we left unfinished, forgive what we neglected. Return us to you amongst the truthful, the trustworthy, and the righteous. For you are the one who never breaks his promise, never betrays a trust, and never abandons those who place their trust in you. Protect us always from hearts that are not humble, tongues that are not wise, and eyes that have forgotten how to cry. Forgive us for our shortcomings and guide and bless us all. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Barakallahu feekum. Maghrib is going to come in 2 minutes. If people want to just put chairs away, make wudu, we'll call the adhan in a bit. If anybody's fasting, there's dates here on the front table, so feel free to come and grab one. And we will see everybody next Monday, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Should I bring some more dates from the back?
Let's see. I don't know if this many people are fasting.
Now you're available for dinners?
Yeah, man.
Today's the one day that I'm not available for dinner.
What do you have going on?
I'm going to try to run to a volleyball